Radio.
Hello and welcome to Cryptocurrent, the only podcast to bring you beginner and advanced knowledge of cryptocurrency and blockchain, analyses of cryptocurrency markets, and discussions on growing a business within the crypto space. Stay tuned and stay cryptocurrent.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cryptocurrent. Your host here, Richard Carthon. And today I have a guest from halfway across the world. Really excited to have Mr. Colton here with us, and he is with Blockchain Partnerships. Colton, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks a lot, Richard. I really enjoyed having you on the Pendulum Insight podcast before, and I'm looking forward to digging into some of these questions with you and talking more about blockchain partnerships.
Oh, absolutely. And also for everyone who just heard that, yes, I was on his podcast. We had a great conversation. It was nice and long. I'm going to put it in the show notes of this episode. And, you know, Colton's podcast is extremely interesting, man. There's so many great speakers that you've been able to bring in and talk about various blockchain projects that are going on, and even some different crypto ones as well. So definitely want to plug in his podcast here as well, but also want to plug in what he's been working on and what he's been doing. But before we kind of dive into that, Colton, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your background?
Yeah, sure. So, originally when I was a bit younger, I was actually promoting parties, raves, hip hop shows, things like that for quite a while. And, this was something that obviously you don't really do that sort of thing full time. I was in school. I was sort of figuring things out on the internet and moving into making most of my money through internet-based activity, which allowed me to start traveling pretty substantially later on. And I've been working as a PI, an open source intelligence consultant. And that was something I was also able to do a lot through just being on a laptop and digging into what's out there. But of course, when you spend so much time in that kind of information security and open source intel space, you're going to run across all kinds of fascinating stuff. And prior to becoming a digital asset broker for things like online businesses, things that are cash flow positive, like a website that makes money, I actually had discovered Bitcoin and Litecoin around 2013. So that was just something that kind of happened out of just the research and being on strange corners of the internet, because it was not really on the news back then, as you know.
Right.
And yeah, that was kind of how it all got started.
Gotcha. So we're in 2013 and you first learn about Bitcoin and Litecoin. And so as you start to look in this, where did the transition happen to where you were really interested in cryptocurrency and then transition over into more of the blockchain space?
Yeah. So at the time, I didn't really get heavily into it. I was more of just curious about the technology. I didn't even have enough money to speculate heavily as much as I would have liked to at the time. I was just saying, hey, what do I do? It's one thing to read a guide, and there were not a ton of how-to videos in 2013. And even then, it was still kind of relatively unknown. There were maybe little clips here and there, little blog posts. And so I figured it out. I sent some, I received some, I bought some, and that was fun for me for a minute. And then I kind of got distracted by other things. I was always interested in technology that was associated with it at the time. So if you were back then a Bitcoin user, a Litecoin user, you probably also were curious about Tor. You're probably curious about some things like that. And, that was sort of an interesting path to go down, particularly as I was doing investigations going into 2014.
Right. So real quick, for listeners who don't know Tor, can you just explain that very briefly?
Tor. So it stands for the onion router. And basically it's a way of routing your traffic through a lot of different servers or computers around the world, that different people using Tor or people running, nodes. Without getting overly technical, the point is it allows you to browse the internet and Tor hidden services in a mostly anonymous way. And it's
Gotcha.
a privacy tool. Yeah.
No, very interesting.
Yeah. So, and you asked about getting into blockchain. So that actually didn't happen until later, 2017. I thought, the kind of the Bitcoin curiosity that I had been more or less satisfied, and that maybe some point in the future I'd dig back into it when I felt like I had free time. And then people that I never even knew were remotely into technology, let alone cryptocurrency, started asking me about if they should buy Bitcoin. And well, I don't think so. Pretty sure you shouldn't. I don't know. Now I feel maybe I probably should have kept my mouth shut. But nonetheless, I realized it was becoming this big thing. And what the hell is Ethereum? Why is everybody talking about it? So I went and dug into it a little bit, watched the market kind of tank, and then kept looking into what was being done. What is a smart contract? How are people using this right now? And that was really kind of an interesting point at which I realized, okay, so the technology that is blockchain and the cryptocurrency that is Bitcoin, there's a lot going on here. Like, development didn't just stop. People are doing a little bit more than just buying drugs or just speculating, although there's a lot of that still. So,
right.
I had to dig in.
Yeah. And so interesting statement back in 2017, people were asking you, I mean, of course, hindsight's 2020, but, as you were looking at the underlying technology that is cryptocurrency, that is blockchain, and you start to see some of these different, possibilities, what then made you make the transition to want to start your company Blockchain Partnerships? And then what is it? And then how did you come up with the concept?
Right. So Blockchain Partnerships, right now it's not even incorporated as a separate entity. Pendulum Insight is a company I've had for a couple of years now, which sort of just serves as my representation of myself doing these different projects. And Blockchain Partnerships, if it does take off, and I hope it does become useful for people, that arose out of a need of my own personal research, focusing on business development. I wanted to set up partnerships and pursue that sort of marketing activity and business development activity with other like-minded people. Basically, if you look in the marketing space, a lot of people are involved in something called mastermind. Marketers and life coaches and all that, they love their masterminds. Like, man, what if I could have something that was that useful, but in this place where you have more tech and finance-oriented characters who are not as accustomed to that format? And if it was an ongoing thing, I couldn't really find it. Decided to try to make it happen. I created a free LinkedIn group, got some members, got some good feedback on the principle of it. And then I expanded that to a Telegram group. I saw that people were actually connecting with each other. It was working. The beginnings of partnerships taking place, introductions to key people at different companies. And, that was really what helped me decide to pursue it further, to provide an environment where not only are there people that are business development oriented, because there's so many groups for traders, so many groups for developers, and they're kind of, hey, let's actually create a business that makes money. That part is just being kind of forgotten, which tends to happen in any environment where you're heavy on the tech side or the art side or whatever, and they think, oh, money will just take care of itself. Right. People will just buy it when it's there. And that's not necessarily true. You need public relations, you need proper marketing, channel sales strategies. So I wanted to find more people like that. The problem is so many of the people in this industry or this space, so to speak, are completely sideways, crooked, incompetent. And I'm trying to prevent that using background checks, due diligence, referral-based recruitment, and that extra level of being cautious so that we can actually speak freely and rely on the people that we're building relationships with.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point right there that within the space, although there are a lot of good people, there are a lot of good individuals and projects that are being worked on, there are a lot of people that are still sketchy and still will try to mess you over if you allow them to, and are going to push their whatever agenda that they have going on, and kind of being trolls, if you will, in different groups. So what have you noticed, or what's been very effective techniques for you to be able to, eliminate that as much as possible, but also still providing value to everyone that you're trying to connect?
Yeah, well, that's something that has been getting a sense of people, talking to them a few times, meeting them in person where that's convenient or possible, and getting really just that slow and steady approach to building a network. If you go and you get 10,000 people in a Telegram group, in a week or two. I mean, or however long it takes, right? That's possible, but those are basically worthless connections. You're just broadcasting to them. If you're more careful about it and you get a sense and you find some people who really seem to share your values, and they'll basically tell you privately, hey, don't deal with that company. They owe one of my clients X amount of dollars or Bitcoin or whatever. And don't talk to these guys. They've screwed somebody over. And you sort of build this mental blacklist. Maybe if you run into enough of them, you start keeping track somewhere. And it's sort of a process of elimination. You can run a background check if they're U.S. citizens, or some countries it's easier to get data, and it's like $20 or $30 to get a cheap one, which will give you basic criminal history and stuff like that. I would advocate doing that if you need to. If you're going to spend any money with them or approach investors on their behalf, anything where your name is going to get dragged through the mud potentially, then trust but verify. Look for inconsistencies too. And if somebody's self-promoting a lot, I find that self-promoters are often trying to basically cover up some fundamental inadequacy they're afraid people are going to notice.
Right. And that's a good tip. And you're touching on a lot of good things for people to look out as they, of course, are networking and either diving into the space or trying to connect dots. And it kind of transitions into like me and the next question I want to ask you about, telling us your experience about networking internationally, especially in this market. Like, what is the biggest pieces of advice that you have for people?
Yeah. Okay. So internationally speaking, I've been in the Philippines and I've been in Thailand and, Vietnam in this time. And predominantly the times I've connected with people in this space was in Thailand and in the Philippines. And I've met some really great, honest people who have good intentions. And I've also met some people that are pretty much, they're either just for the quick buck or they are jumping into a new space because it's one of those places where there's so much hype and there's so much happening that if they don't really have a great track record in their other industry, then they can come in and hope that nobody will notice. So what I would also say is if you're doing things here, a lot of the sketchiest people I've run into are not necessarily other people who are foreign and went to set up shop. It's sometimes people who they're well connected maybe to some financial interests, but they're doing things that would technically probably be illegal in terms of like a pump and dump thing or illegal securities trading, and they don't really care. So because the enforcement of laws and the interpretation of laws can vary from what you might be used to, say if you're a US citizen or you're from Australia or the UK, and then how things are handled in countries that, it's just a bit different. So right. You don't really know how well people know each other. They might represent themselves a certain way. I've had a lot of things pushed on me, which were sort of red flag right away. It's like, why are you even offering this? We haven't talked at all, right? If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Yeah.
No, that's very good. Yeah, I've actually had a couple experiences with the same where people were trying to push something on me and was asking me to become involved in something that, one, as I heard more of the story, it didn't make a lot of sense. And then two, like, if it's this good and this easy to happen, then why do you need me? And like, what is all this that's coming up? So like, I definitely feel you on that outlook. So I appreciate that. But then on the more positive side though, like with networking internationally and getting to go to all these different places, what have been good things or like some good nuggets that you should look out for as you try to like dive into a more broad audience?
Yeah, I think that if you can meet with people who are having backgrounds in the financial sector of the country you're in, or who are attorneys or connected to attorneys, and they can interpret the securities laws for you or the regulations, then that's helpful. And it doesn't necessarily have to be securities. It could be commodities. It could be all sorts of aspects of finance. And then, because you have also situations like remittances in the Philippines, so where that's a huge opportunity there. So look for people who have some kind of credibility in the field that is being mixed with blockchain technology. Because by itself, it's just a technology. It's kind of agnostic to the industry. It's particularly well suited to finance and arguably logistics. But if the people you're talking to actually have legitimate credibility in those more old school industries that are already well established. That's really helpful. It's a good indicator, and it's not a golden ticket or anything, but it certainly helps give you a sense of who to speak with.
Right. So you just brought up something, remittances. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think 10% of the Philippines GDP is actually overseas foreign workers, overseas Filipino workers, and they send money back to the Philippines in vast amounts of money. So a lot of the consumer economy, actually, the spending here is funded by people who have an aunt or an uncle or a parent or a child that has gone overseas to work elsewhere. And they send money back, and they're using various different services like Remitly or TransferWise or PayPal, or God forbid using Western Union, and which is fine. Not to slight the Western Union guys, but
yeah,
basically this is a problem. This is a thing with a lot of fees, and so they've started using things like coins.ph, and there's a couple others. And that's been kind of interesting to see people trying to solve the remittance issue with cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. And then that's something I spoke to a guy named, I believe it was Alexi Lane from Everex. They're doing a similar thing with remittances going from Thailand to Myanmar. And you have a lot of these communities that need to send money, and they're doing it in a way where they're losing a lot to fees, or they're not entirely certain that it's going to get delivered every time. So it's good to have transparency, fast transactions, and low fees in a place where a lot of the population is unbanked, and they have only a mobile phone. They don't have a computer. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, a good example. I mean, you hit the hammer on the nail, man. I have a friend who was working out in Shell in the Philippines, and just like you said with remittance, he was sending money back to some of his family in the States, and like he was losing like 40% of his money to transactions fee. And so he learned about cryptocurrency, and he started just sending it via Bitcoin, and he was just like, dude, I've saved money, I've saved time, and like it's just way less. And so like I definitely see the opportunity with remittance like everywhere. Internationally, that's when I really started paying attention to cryptocurrency, because when I saw it was such on a global scale, and the international outlook of this and like what it solves, it's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really what sold me on it too, because I think aside from anything regulation driven, anything that's driven by government intervention, which as most of us have witnessed, it can be well intentioned but often poorly implemented and half-heart with the execution. So when I see technology coming sort of from a grassroots level, not always, but it's often you get things that are funded by government grants, and so there's this good sort of interplay there. But when you have different little companies popping up or open source projects, and they're saying, hey, look, let's try it this way, and people start using it naturally, and it's solving a problem, it reminds me a lot of that picture that gets shared online where you can see two sidewalks that meet at a 90-degree angle, and then there's this path just beaten through the grass that cuts diagonally to the other one, because that's people want the easy thing. They want the thing that works well, and they're just designing around it and behaving around it.
Yeah, man. And I mean, yes. And so like with that being said, there's a lot of different opportunities that are out in the space right now. And I'm sure that you have either a crypto or blockchain project that has you like really excited. Do you want to speak towards like what that might be?
I've had really good conversations with the guys from Token IQ, and what they're using is basically Stellar to do tokenization of securities, and that's pretty cool. You should go check out what they're doing if you're listening. It's not necessarily like an altcoin or anything. It's just a project in the blockchain space. And then as far as an actual coin, so to speak, I don't really get excited about what could be so much, which I know sounds horrible, but what I do like to see is things that are actually happening. That's what gets me excited. It's like people actually use Bitcoin. Similarly, I think Monero has a nice place, and similar projects, but specifically Monero. Yes, are criminals using it? Of course. Duh. But the point is, it serves a function. It's private enough. It's working, and people are using it in high volume. And to me, that's inspiring, because I think in the rush to be legitimate, people got kind of excited that Bitcoin isn't anonymous and that Bitcoin, transactions are public. And that was like, oh no, it's okay. It's okay. See, this is all above board. The government can love us now and we won't get in trouble, which is totally fine and good. And that's good for Bitcoin. But there was a purpose that people liked using Bitcoin for that I think is better served by Monero. And frankly, it's a right. Personally, on a philosophical level, I think people have a right to transact anonymously, and we can't ignore that.
Gotcha. Yeah, and Monero speaks to that. And for those who don't know about Monero, Monero basically lets you truly be anonymous, and it's a privacy token. With Bitcoin, it's pseudo-anonymous, where like you might not know where the address is coming from, but you can at least follow the money. Monero, you can't do that.
Right.
So, and as you were saying, the market volume, as people are using it, the way that cryptocurrency truly gets to where it needs to be is through market adoption. And the way that you get through market adoption is people actually using it and having use cases. And so I agree with that, with the aspect of where you're seeing it being used and there's actual use cases and it's growing in the sense of on a day-to-day basis, people actually transacting with it. I think that is very exciting. And there are, several projects that are beginning to have that. But as we're a quarter into 2019. So for everyone listening, this is April of 2019. What are some things that are on the horizon in the blockchain space that you're looking out for?
I'm really curious to see things play out in terms of the secondary market for digital securities or security tokens, whatever you like to call them. I think everybody's still trying to figure out the terminology, but fundamentally seeing people trading securities that are tokenized on a high level, the way that you see cryptocurrency being traded and exchanged, to see that kind of liquidity actually develop, the sort of holy grail of what's being promised by the STO people. I would love to see that actually in a live environment. And I know that it's starting to happen. There's some exchanges that are active and all that. But again, once the volume is there, and then really ultimately, I want to see how the behavior of the private equity people will adapt to that. And when that kind of money gets involved and those kinds of sophisticated players get involved, just to see how people start actually financing growth and how they start dealing with all of the different small businesses in the country that are pretty much never going to go to an IPO, but they're still doing 5, 10, 20, 30, $50 million a year in revenue. They're not mom and pop shops, but they're just not going to ever be publicly traded. I want to see what happens there. And I think this is a time that's absolutely ripe for that. And that this is a technology that's going to help them kind of step into that next phase. And it'll be really, really cool.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many pockets of opportunity in this space, especially just like you said, the ones that might not IPO and like raise hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions, but like that's still a huge opportunity to make money for some people. And it's how do you capitalize on those opportunities, and STOs could be the solution.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of just things coming up for people that aren't in the space that can combine what they are doing in regular business over into cryptocurrency. So that is, I agree, is super exciting that people should be paying attention to. And Colton, like you left a lot of like different valuable information with everyone. You gave some great tips and some tidbits. But as we kind of get to the end of the show, I always like to ask our speakers, like, what is a final thought that you would like to leave with our listeners today? So what do you have for us today?
I would say that a deal is only as good as the people you're dealing with. So due diligence and, working closely with people that have been recommended to you, introduced to you by somebody that you already trust. Just be careful out there.
Absolutely. Well, Colton, thank you again so much for coming on the show, dropping your knowledge. And for everyone that wants to connect with you, what are some different ways that they can do that?
Well, you can go to blockchainpartnerships.com and basically set up a time to talk to me through any of the buttons on the site right now. It's an application process. If you're curious about joining, we can also get you added to the free Telegram group so you can get a sense of what it's like. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. My name's Colton Moffitt. I'm sure you'll see it in the title of the episode here. And just send me a message and we can start talking that way.
Sounds perfect. Well, again, Colton, thanks for being with us today. And for everyone that's listening, stay cryptocurrent.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of Cryptocurrent. For more information on this episode and all of our episodes, please visit us at www.crypto-current.co. Stay up to date with the latest news in cryptocurrency by signing up for our newsletter. You will receive a daily email Monday through Sunday that is personalized and curated content specific to you and your interest, powered by artificial intelligence.
This has been another episode of Cryptocurrent, bringing you one step closer to becoming a crypto and blockchain aficionado. We look forward to giving you the latest in crypto news and analyses next week. Stay cryptocurrent.
Please use available exits now.